So, Pentecost, we've established it's the birthday of the church. We've also established that it's a time to celebrate, a time to rejoice in the gift that comes from God, the Holy Spirit. And it is a very special day, but I guess it doesn't get the same wide recognition outside the church that, say, Christmas Day and Easter Sunday gets. I guess it's because there are no Christmas presents, no Easter bunnies or Easter eggs. Yet it is the celebration of the birth of the church. It's the moment when the disciples took up the work of Christ, the point where the baton was handed over from Jesus' teaching to the disciples, who were then commissioned to go out and build the church across the world. But Jesus did not expect the disciples to do this by themselves or just on their own account. So he sent his promised gift, the Holy Spirit. I mean, just imagine for a moment, as Peter reflected earlier, what it must have been like for the disciples there in the upper room. They would be full of mixed emotions. They had signed up to follow Jesus, yes, and it had been a great and fantastic experience. Yet the ending for them left them frightened and bewildered. No blaze of glory, but betrayal, denial, and death. They had seen Jesus again, risen from the dead. But what about those who put him to death? Were they still after the disciples? And so much had happened in such a short space of time. They must have been exhausted with emotions that the events had brought upon them, not really knowing what to do next. I guess it seems not unlike a church council meeting sometimes in modern days. But then something amazing happens. The Holy Spirit comes upon them. A rushing wind and the tongues of fire burst into the room, through the locks, through their fears. And they're transformed. Suddenly, the world is different and open to them, and they become enabled, filled with strength and the ability to do the work ahead that Christ had commissioned for them to do. I suppose, filled with the Holy Spirit, they're given the passion, the power and the purpose. The passion for the truth of the gospel and the need to go out and address the crowds and share it with the rest of the world. Power to speak in tongues and in many languages, to become great communicators of the gospel so that it becomes available to all. And purpose. A purpose to see the way ahead, to go out into the work and do the work of creating the kingdom of heaven here on earth. Communicating the love of God through the teaching of Jesus Christ. Just as he promised them at the beginning, he made them fishers of men. Peter then says to the crowd, quoting from Joel, God says, I will pour out my spirit on all people. And so we too are filled with the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit makes a difference in our lives. I guess it is the X factor that lifts us up and gives us a new perspective on life. A life lived through faith and with grace and love. It's the Spirit that reaches the parts that other spirits cannot reach. In other words, filled with the Holy Spirit, all things become possible to us, and we're enabled with God's love to be the people that Jesus calls us to be. with the Holy Spirit, we have the passion to read and absorb the words of the gospel in our lives and to hunger to know more. It gives us the power to share the good news with those around us, not to be shy, not introverted and locked in by fear of what others might think or say, but willing to share. And it gives us the purpose to live out the gospel in our daily lives, to be a living, relevant testament to the love of God through Jesus Christ. And there is more. To truly be what Christ calls us, we also need to be aware that the Holy Spirit also gifts us with grace, love and faith. And with these we can open our hearts and our minds to the calling of God and live our lives as true followers of Christ. So with the Holy Spirit, the ordinary becomes exceptional. With the Holy Spirit, the impossible becomes possible. With the Holy Spirit, we are joined and blessed in God's love. Amen. And a prayer. Gracious God, we thank you for those extraordinary moments we occasionally experience which change our lives, giving us joy and fulfilment we never imagined possible. We thank you especially for the great gift of your Holy Spirit, an experience which transformed the lives of the apostles, which has changed the lives of countless believers across the centuries, and which has the power to reshape our lives here and now. Open our hearts, our minds and our souls to your living presence, so that we shall know your life-changing power for ourselves. Amen.